Hello dear friends, Patrick Peace here again. Welcome to all new subscribers. I'm going to be covering, I don't know if you can see that very well, the chapter 2 of The Reason for God by Timothy Keller, which is called How Could a Good God Allow Suffering? That's chapter 2 we're covering today. If you recall in the last, I'll just briefly mention first, the last chapter was entitled There Can't Just Be One True Religion. Kind of a rhetorical question. It talks about how even skeptics have to take leaps of faith. Even skeptics have a type of implicit or implied religious outlook. And he does a pretty good job, although he doesn't mention anything to do with language or cultural metrics or things like that. His arguments are very lucid, very inspiring, very encouraging for somebody that may be struggling with that question. So that was chapter 1. Today, chapter 2, How Could a Good God Allow Suffering? And I'm going to go through here right into it. He says, the assertion that the world is filled with pointless evil is it contains a hidden premise, namely that if evil appears pointless to me, then it must be pointless. This is the premise that people bring up against God. And just so you know, this is one of the most popular arguments that atheists use to support their lack of belief in God. They say, well, God allows suffering. I'd never want to have a God that is like that. Or they use the problem of evil. They'll say, well, God can either remove the evil and he doesn't want to, so he's not all loving, or he can remove the evil, doesn't want to, or doesn't have the ability to, so he's not all powerful. You know that one, right? I'm getting it mixed up in my mind, but you know the idea. So how could a good God allow suffering? The assertion that the world is filled with pointless evil is a hidden premise, namely that if evil appears pointless to me, it must be pointless. The reason is, of course, fallacious. Just because you can't see or imagine a good reason why God might allow something to happen doesn't mean there can't be one. There could be a good reason, right? Again, we see lurking within supposedly hard-nosed skepticism and enormous faith in one's own cognitive faculties. If our minds can't plumb the depths of the universe for good answers to suffering, well, then there can't be any. And he goes on along that argument. It's very powerful, talking about how you're presuming that there can't be any purpose within it. And so here I'm just going to continue. I'm just going to pick out a few specific points of what he covers, and then what I'll do is I'm going to put some of those points in the description of this video below, and hopefully I can get that done before I post it. So here we go. The non-believer in God doesn't have a good basis for being outraged at injustice, which was the reason for objecting to God in the first place. If you're sure that this natural world is unjust and filled with evil, you're assuming the reality of some extranatural or supernatural standard by which to make your judgment. That's a very interesting sentence that he includes there. It says, could there really be any such thing as horrifying wickedness if there was no God and we just evolved? I don't see how there can be such a thing. Only there can be only such a thing only if there's a way that rational creatures are supposed to live, obligated to live. A secular way of looking at the world has no place for genuine moral obligations of every sort, and thus no way to say there is such a thing as genuine and appalling wickedness. Accordingly, if you think there really is such a thing as horrifying wickedness, and it's not just illusion of some sort, then you have a powerful argument for the reality of God. And of course, atheists will counter that with their own juxtapositions and their mental gymnastics, saying, no, I can be moral without God, and on and on. And this is interesting, where he starts to explain this idea of suffering. It says, the Christian God came to earth to deliberately put himself in a position of suffering. That's something to consider, that his purpose involved suffering. And the suffering of God was all the more intense because of his previous eternity together with the Father, and then he was removed from that, and so the suffering was all the worse. He goes on to describe the pain that he went through. He also talks about the pain of him crying out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. But he doesn't mention, I just would like to throw this in here, the author doesn't mention that he was actually quoting David from Psalm 22 Verse 1, in that psalm, David says the exact same phrase, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And it shows that even at the crucifixion, Christ was aware of his purpose and his fulfillment of the scriptures. Christianity alone among the world's religions claim that God became uniquely and fully human in Jesus Christ and therefore knows firsthand despair, rejection, loneliness, poverty, bereavement, torture, imprisonment, pain, etc., right? Christ experienced all those things on behalf of humanity. Now, he doesn't include the scripture, which I really have to put in at this point, which is for the joy set before him. That's from Hebrews 12, verse 2. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. Christ despises the torture that he had to go through. He hated the shame that he had to endure lying naked on the cross. And but he looked forward to the future. And this is the problem that people have with experiencing or seeing, a child suffer, or somebody, a child that has cancer or something like that. But Christ looks to the future and says, for the joy set before him. And also in Psalm 116, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. And so if humans endure suffering for a purpose, they'll go to the gym and work out, and they'll say, oh, I got a real burn, or they'll train for something and say, yeah, that was really arduous, and I went through a lot of pain, I tortured my body, exaggerating, of course, because they want a better future. This is a part of the human condition, is the concept of self-sacrifice. You go to school for 4 years, 8 years, or 10 years to become a doctor. You're sacrificing during that time. You're enduring hardship by studying for exams at 3 o'clock in the morning, or for the athlete that gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go train, or whatever that they put themselves through. This idea of whatever level is not important at this point and in this context, but it is the concept behind it, the idea of sacrificing, enduring a limited amount of pain, and it is limited because we are in this physical realm, whereas in eternity, it's a more blessed state. It's an eternal state where there is no pain and suffering and so on. And so it pleased God. We're even told it pleased God to bruise him, is a scripture, right? That even crazy passages like the aroma of the sacrifice was a sweet scent to God. Those kind of things from way back. But the fact remains is that God sees into the future the blessedness, the joy, the glory that results from the temporary pain, torture, agony that humans are able to experience. And that is, in essence, part of the purpose of the human condition, is to endure pain, endure heartache. Yes, there's a lot of blessedness in living your life. Of course, there hopefully is and can be, and this is part of God's promise to allow us to have a blessed life while we're here. But we cannot forget the importance in the long run of enduring this type of pain. And so this is what is talked about in this particular chapter. And he goes into a lot of details about the pain and suffering that martyrs went through, and the pain and suffering that Christ went through. And the idea is that we cannot fathom, just because we cannot fathom a purpose in that pain. You say, well, no, this doesn't make any sense to me. Well, just because it doesn't make any sense to you, dear friend, dear atheist, dear believer, just because it doesn't make sense to you here and now with your limited mind, with your limited perspective, it doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose. That's assuming something that's not necessarily true, right? Oh, well, you're assuming God exists, and that's not necessarily true either. Well, yes, I am assuming God exists based on the evidence I have. The evidence within my heart, the conscience that he gave me, the scripture that he left us, and the evidence that I see in nature. And so I have a three-pronged approach for evidence for myself personally, and atheists reject all that. But as far as this one topic, on pain and sorrow and suffering, we are told in Scripture, in fact, even in Revelation, it says, endure for a short time, and I will give you the crown of glory. In Revelation, God mentions that the saints will suffer persecution, but if they endure until the end, basically saying if you endure until you pass away, you're going to have a much greater glory in heaven. And so this is the hope of the believer. And so this is the topic that's covered in chapter 2. I'll leave some of those quotes for you in the notes. I hope that helps address that question, because in terms of suffering and pain, you have to look at in a span of eternity. We're here for this little blip of time, and we see that there's already been 2,000 years of history, 6,000 years of history, tens of thousands of years of history of the human condition, however you want to measure it. And so our time here on the earth is this little blip, and yet all of eternity, we could have a blessed future, becoming like the angels of God. Christ described it. He says, you become like the angels of God, and there's no more sorrow, no more death, no more pain, no more worrying about marrying and giving into marriage and all that kind of stuff. Christ says that we become like the angels in heaven after we leave this earth. And so this is the blessed hope of those people that unfortunately do have to go through pain and suffering, and it can help to make sense of the pain and suffering that is in the world. I hope that helps, and I hope you're able to analyze some of the reasons that Timothy Keller provides in this excellent book. That's the first 2 chapters done, and we shall talk again soon. I hope you're able to spend time with people you love, and that you are having a blessed week. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Welcome to new subscribers. Please like and share, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Take care of yourself. Bye for now.